Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another one of our leadership programs. Before I introduce our guest today, thank all of you for coming, your lecturers, and I'd also like to thank the group at our Lura campus, and I saw Mr. Go there for getting a group who hopefully are going to ask us some questions. Our guest today is Mr. Jan Smits, the CEO of IHG for Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Australia, which is about 43 countries that he is responsible for. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Smits to just tell us a little, well, as much as he would like to, about his career and how he got into hospitality.
Okay. Firstly, thank you all for being here, I think. And it's a great pleasure to be here today. And I've really looked forward to spending some time with you for the next couple of hours. As you can tell from my name, I'm from Dutch heritage. My parents were both Indonesian born. So I spent most of my life traveling around the world. So I got the passion for hospitality very early in life by staying in lots of hotels and traveling a lot with my parents. I was born in the West Indies, in Trinidad. And I lived in Africa, I lived in the Middle East, I've lived in Malaysia, India, Singapore, Indonesia. And obviously Australia is home. Actually, Sydney's home. For the last 13 years, I've been living in Singapore. 14 years I've been living in Singapore and running the Asia, Middle East, and Africa region from Singapore, which, like Val said, covers about 40 odd countries, about 280 hotels, about 150 in the pipeline, across very diverse part of the world. And it doesn't really exist as a region except in our own minds in IHG. But I can explain a little bit more about why we put it together like that. From a career-wise, like I said, when I finished high school, I really wanted to get into hospitality, and I can tell you in the late 70s and early 80s, there wasn't much choice around the world. There was a few in Europe, and I was at boarding school in Holland, and I wanted to go study there, but my parents were living here, so I came to Australia. And in those days, the only degree course that existed in hospitality was at Victoria University. And I'm not a poster child because I didn't graduate, right? So I'll talk about that a little bit more, right? So I went to Footscray in those days, and on my placement year, which was the third year, you had a full year, and I went to work for a company called Southern Pacific Hotels, which in those days, there was really not a very big hotel business in this country in those days, and the Parker Oil brand was right up there. And at the end of my practical year, my intern year, they offered me a banquet job and a food and beverage manager job. So unfortunately, I didn't go back. But look, that was the 80s, right? Nowadays, trying to get ahead in the industry without a degree is going to be very, very difficult. So I did that for a few years. I traveled around Australia. I worked in very different locations, came through the food and beverage side of the business. And then when I was about 27 or something, I became a general manager of what is now the Park Royal in Parramatta, actually. I opened that hotel. Then after that, I worked in Cairns as general manager during the pilot strike. And then I went to Penang, to Malaysia, to open a hotel. Worked in India for a while. So I went all the way through operations. Came back to Australia, ran Ayers Rock, the whole complex for a while, which was absolutely fantastic because you learned how to run an airport, retail. We had to house about 350 people. I was deputy mayor. Don't ask me what that meant, but I had to sit on the council. It was an absolutely fantastic role, but it's just a very isolated part of the world. So if you ever get offered a job in Ayers Rock, really think about it. Then after that, I actually left the Southern Pacific Group, and for 5 years I ran Ridges, and I was the director of operations for the global business. I actually expanded their business into the Middle East and UK and Asia. And then I came back to IHG. And those by then, SPHC had been bought by IHG, so I went to IHG. And for the last 15 years, I've been with IHG, and I basically went straight to Singapore, ran parts of Southeast Asia and did different bits and pieces. And then about 8 years ago, I took over this region, and I became part of the executive committee in London, and have ever since basically been doing this job. So I came very much through operations side of the business. It's very different nowadays, and I'll talk a bit more about that. I'm most likely one of the last dinosaurs that came through that part of the business, I think, because it's changing rapidly. But there's quite a few people that come through that side of the business.
You said that you came through the F&B side of things. Would you comment on F&B as opposed to rooms division as a career path?
It's going to be biased here, but
Okay.
I said, okay, yeah, you're an F&B man, so yourself. But I think the great thing about the F&B side of the business, what it did was a couple of things. You had to deal with a lot of variety, all right, a lot of complexities, and you had to manage big teams of people. So you really early on learned your people skills because you had huge teams you had to manage. And I remember when at the age of 23, I was managing teams of about 80 people. And so you had to really, and they're all older than you at the time, so it wasn't always the easiest thing to do. But you learned your people skills really, really early. And don't forget about F&B and rooms and whatever else. We're basically in the people and the brand business. And so the skills to motivate, engage big teams of people to execute a strategy or engage with the owner community or your customers is a skill that you need to learn really, really early on. So food and beverage gives you that a little bit more because in rooms, your teams are really smaller and your job was far more finite.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your career path. Could you now share with us IHG, its maybe a little bit about its past, where you currently are, and the future?
Yeah, sure. So IHG, how many of you works or know about IHG? A few? Well, at least there's a few. That's good. But we have about 750,000 rooms around the world, about 5,000 hotels. We're now the third largest after Marriott, Starwood when they get together, and then you've got Hilton and then ourselves. But Hilton and us, there's a couple thousand rooms in it, so it just depends on the day, actually. We operate across 100 countries, 12 brands. Obviously, Intercontinental being our most luxurious brand, and then you go all the way through the brand T to through lifestyle. You got Crown Plaza, and then you've got Hotel Indigo, Kimpton, Even. So you've got lifestyle brands. Then you've got Crown Plaza, Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, and then you've got the long stay brands of Staybridge, Wallux, yes. And then so you basically 12 brands. So we actually have less brands than some of our competitors, but that's more by design, and we're very focused. And then you've got Irish Rewards, which is your loyalty program, which has got about 90 million. We're the largest loyalty program in the world for hotels, and we've got about 90 million loyal members. So our history can be traced back to about 1780, because IHG started its life through acquisition. So Best Brewing was a brewing business, and then in the late 80s, the UK government decided that a brewer in the UK could only own that many pubs. So Best decided to buy hotels. So they bought Holiday Inn International, and then Holiday Inn Domestic, and then after that they bought Intercontinental in the 90s. So we came together through an amalgamation of buying of hotel brands. And then the other brands like Wallux and Even and Hotel Indigo were built in-house. They were designed by the company. And then Staybridge was bought, and so it was an amalgamation of different brands. We like I said, we run 100 countries. We run 4 regions. So there's the Americas, Europe, and then myself, and then China. So we have 4 regions. There's four of me in the world, so to speak. And what else was I going to tell about? So the other thing that's maybe important, which is a bit different about us compared to some of the other companies, is we went about 10 years ago. We decided to go asset light. So we decided to sell all our hotels that we own. So we owned about 400 hotels, about $3-4 billion worth of hotels in the world. And we decided to sell them, but still run them, but not own the bricks and mortar. And the reason for that was that we, first of all, weren't very good at asset managers, to be honest. And secondly, it was far better to have all our resources and everything we do focused on what our core competency was, which was building great global platforms to make sure that guests stay in our hotels, focus on our loyalty, focus on our brands, focus on our people. That was part of our promise versus less owning hotels. A lot of other companies are now trying to do the same, but so we only own 7 hotels out of 5,000. But it doesn't mean we won't invest. We will invest in hotels, we develop them, we sell them, and off we go. And it's a very, very different model to some of the other companies that you might come across.
So you mentioned there's 4 of you. How often do you meet with your brothers and sisters?
I see my brothers and sisters. So the EC, the Global EC, the Executive Committee, so there's 4 of us. You got the head of strategy, the head of brands, and the chief development officer, chief commercial officer, finance, technology, HR. I'm sure I forgot someone. Oh, the CEO. We meet 8 times a year. 8 times a year.
And generally in Singapore, or? Yeah.
1 in Singapore, 1 in the US, 1 in Europe, and the rest all in the UK, and then China once a year.
You talked about the number of hotels you've got, and it would seem to me that we're getting a real polarisation of, we've got Starwood and Marriott coming together. We've got Accor just taking on a whole load of new brands. Is that the way it's going? Is there just going to be 4 or 5 mammoth players and then some boutique hotels and budget properties?
The interesting thing is, if you look at the industry, between the 10 players, top 10 players, there's 115 brands. and 30% of those brands, so what's 30%? About 40 of those brands didn't exist 10 years ago. So there's a lot of new brands being invented and rolled out, and I think the reason is because we look at it a lot different now, because there used to be, if you go back 10 years ago, a person who stayed in an Intercontinental or a Holiday Inn, people assumed that they will only stay in a Holiday Inn or only in an Intercontinental. But what has changed is people use hotels for occasions. So one day you want to be in a hotel for a totally different purpose than when you take your kids and your family on holiday, and you will move between brands. So the reason there's so many new brands being created is, lifestyle brands didn't exist 10 years ago, all right? Or unless you say AMEA was a lifestyle resort brand, but lifestyle brands didn't exist 10 years ago, and we've got 3, and it's the quickest growing sector. And then you've got all these sub brands, and it is just that, the millennials are traveling like there's no tomorrow. Travel is not a luxury anymore. It's just part of life. People use hotels for different occasions, so they want far more bespoke sort of experiences and brands. So it's changing rapidly. And then you put the digital framework over the top, where there's total transparency, and people can exactly work out what kind of experience to expect in a certain brand, and it will change. And so it is very, very personalized, very much for the occasion you want to use and why you want to stay there. And that's what's driving all these different brands. Now, your other question is, will there only be a couple of us? I should have looked this up. I can't remember, but even the top five of us, so if you've got Starwood, Marriott, Accor, Hilton, ourselves, what would be the 5th?
Wyndham.
I think we only, and don't quote me on this, but I think we only have about 20% of the branded inventory in the world. Okay, but we have about 40% of the pipeline, or 50% of the pipeline. So it is shifting. There will be big players, but there's always rooms for niche players. But the digital framework and the loyalty platforms and the distribution systems you nowadays need to get customers to stay in your hotels will give a benefit to bigger players.
You've talked a lot about brands, and that must be one of the most difficult things. I mean, managing from Intercontinentals down to your 2 or 3 star properties, and yes, you've got policies and procedures in place, but some of them have to change down, and having to switch from the top to the middle to the bottom must be challenging. What are the biggest challenges?
Brands, honestly. No, the biggest challenge is that everyone in this room always wants to work for a luxury brand and not for the other brands, right? But taking all that into consideration, the biggest issue with the brands is to have a really clear brand definition and what the brand stands for, and then everything flows from that, right? So the way you train your employees, the way you sell it to your customers, the way you sell it to your owners, it all starts with the real clarity around the brands, and then the experiences along the customer journey is you all train in. We use a lot of digital online training now, because that's how people want to learn in their own time on their smartphones, iPads, or whatever else we use, and it's lots of very pinpointed training we do to bring the brands to life. But the thing is, all these brands, even if you have a clear brand proposition, the only way they get brought to life is through the people. So training and having the best leadership and resources, and making sure that your teams are really, really well up to date with what needs to be done to bring these brands to life is absolutely critical. Okay. And like I said earlier, we're in the people business.
How does that then change? country to country? Because obviously some very different countries that you're working in, and vastly different social things that are going on.
Absolutely, and that is a challenge. And some countries but we separate the development. You know, you've got the leadership development, you've got the middle management development, and then you've got like at the grassroots. In some countries we have to teach people how to speak English. We need to teach them hygiene. We need to teach them how to wear a uniform. So, because in some places we are the only employer in town, all right? So we have some really important roles to fulfill. But generally, so you basically tailor make it per market, not for all markets, right? So Southeast Asia you can kind of lump together, and then you've got other markets in Australia by itself, and Japan. But you do need to, you know, you do need to tailor make it to the market so that you're in the best position to attract the best talent.
Is that a big issue when you move your talent around, such as a GM from Australia to the Middle East, or a GM from the Middle East coming back to Australia, or?
So mobility, so, you know, as you can imagine, we have, what did I say, about 270 hotels. So we've got 270 GMs, and then there must be another 40 hotels in some stage of opening. So you have about 300 odd GMs at a time. If you just want, let's just talk about the general manager at the moment. Now, some of them have to be mobile and some don't, but mobility is an important factor. And the big issue for the mobility piece is also just the cultural awareness, because you are going to work in different cultures. So your EQ, the EQ side of the training and development we do is really, really important. But so different brands, so some brands are very domestic, some are very international. Intercontinental, international brand. If you then go and talk about Holiday Inn and Holiday Inn Express, they're far more domestic brands. So often the leaders from those brands are not as the necessity to be as mobile is not as important as people from the Intercontinental brand. But the other thing we haven't spoken about when we start talking about general managers and hotels is by being asset light, we added another stakeholder, which is the owner. Because every hotel is owned by someone, either a high net worth individual or a fund or an institution, and the owner is also sitting at the table. So you've basically got 4 people that you have to manage. You know, you've got your guests, you've got the teams that work for you, you've got your owner, and then you've got IHG as an organization. So it is the leadership qualities that you nowadays need as a general manager, and the cultural awareness, because you might be working in New York, but your owner lives in Shanghai, all right, or Tokyo or Seoul, and you need to be able to, you know, manage all the stakeholders differently. And like the hotels in Dubai, the Intercontinental in Dubai has got 62 nationalities working in there. So you just need to, you know, that leadership and understanding the cultural awareness and working across different cultures is just absolutely critical nowadays.
So you mentioned 4 stakeholders. Who's the hardest one to work with? Or should we say the easiest?
I think the general manager will tell you it's IHG most likely, but it's actually the owner, I think. No, it's...
It varies.
It varies, but honestly, if you're aligned and you've built a trusting relationship, which is what it's all about, and it's all about building that trust base, then all relationships are based on trust. So once you have that all established and you look after it, then you can manage all 4 relationships quite easily.
Going back to your career, I've got a question here from one of our students. What's thus far in your career, the project that you're most proud of that you've started, completed, and it's up and
Most likely the one I'm on. Okay. I honestly, look, I told I a bit of tongue in cheek about AirSrock, but that was an incredible experience for me to work in that part of the world, and I learned so much. And and also to work with the indigenous, Uluru and all that was just fantastic. I learned more in those couple of years than I learned for a long, long time. But the journey I've been on now in the last 7 years has been absolutely amazing. And because first of all, working across so many different cultures in a territory that doesn't exist on the map, and trying to, because at the same time I also have to educate I spend a lot of time educating the company, because people are based in a certain part of the world and have a certain lens. So making sure that trying to design a strategy that will work across 40 countries is fantastic. It takes a lot of effort, and just across the different cultures. And our ownership base is about 80% high net worth individuals and only about 20% institutional, which is unusual, because if you look at the Australian ownership of the portfolio, it will be 80% institutional, 20% high net worth individuals. So I spend most of my time nowadays with owners trying to grow the business. So I'd say 40% of my time as owners, 40% on talent, and about 20% looking at the numbers, because there are lots of people looking at the numbers. And my theory has always been, if you get the right people in the jobs with the right training and the right motivation, the numbers is an output.
If you could just expand on that from the question we had posed to us in the corridor earlier on the correlation
happy
between
employee,
staff, the hotel, and
happy employees drive RevPAR, absolutely. But so we believe in IG, we believe that an engaged workforce will drive RevPAR, which will drive happy guests, which will drive RevPAR. Right, so that's what we believe in, and I can prove it many, many times for you. So we monitor. So in AMEA we have about 60,000 people working, and so we monitor their engagement both in the hotel and in corporate on a regular basis, and it's one of the most important things. And then we put a whole strategy about if it's not going the way we want it to go, but straight away you can see the hotels. There's a score that you need to get to that will then ensure that you will drive maximum loyalty through your guests, which will then drive profit, which will give you happy owners at the same time, right? So that link is there, and it falls off really quickly, because if you don't get into that 85th percentile, it just drops off. So the benefit of once you get past 85 and you're putting more effort into it, it doesn't give you more output. So we monitor this really, really strictly, and it's one of the biggest things we do as a regional leadership team, is really focusing on the engagement of both our employees and our guests, and monitoring how that drives profit. Now, going to my other discussion about myself, so that's what I believe in personally, and that's what the company believes in. So my effort always goes into making sure that my senior leaders, my direct reports and the layer below them, have very detailed development plans, and are fully engaged and are fully aware of the responsibilities and execution they have to do. And I then spend a lot of time making sure that one of my key roles is to make sure that we have a deep talent pipeline, lots of succession, making sure that we have lots of diversity, and both from the gender and cultural diversity, from age, all that, because the people that sit on my leadership group, there's 13, we have 8 different nationalities, and half are women. And the thing is, it is really, really important that in a place where I go across 40 countries, that we have that diversity sitting in a room making the decisions. Because otherwise, you're making decisions on things that you don't have insight into. So I spend a lot of time on making sure that our succession pipeline and our talent programs and the things that we we need to give you the long-term health of your business are in place. And then secondly, I need to make sure we keep growing. And then lastly, the numbers will come. If I get the people right, the numbers will come.
Just to go back and not to hog it too much, when you drop behind this 85, how do you relay this to your staff? How do you keep them informed that
we have focus
what
group.
we need to do?
The leaders need to lead, right? So it's the people responsible for parts of their business you'll have focus group, you get feedback, and then you need to adjust. So it's absolutely critical to the business, to the health of the business.
Talking about leaders, obviously in your opinion, what are the 2 or 3 components for a leader, particularly in hospitality?
I think I spoke about, look, what I look for is passion. I like my leaders to be very passionate about the business and what they do, and be passionate about people, because we are in the people business, and you need to love leading people, you need to love working with people, and you need to love all that part of leading, coaching, mentoring, all these things. The other thing I look for is, that you truly want to be in this business. It is a very unique business. It's a lot of fun. It can be very frustrating. You have to travel around. I spend half my life on a plane nowadays, but some people think that's fun, but it used to be fun at one stage, but so you really need to love what you're doing. You need to love the people, what you're doing, and you need to be prepared to, get up and lead and big thing of getting things done. You need to be able to execute stuff, and you need to be prepared to make mistakes and step up and dust yourself off, and off you go.
In terms of promotion within IHG, what's the balance between loyalty of somebody who's worked for you, say 10 or 12 years, or somebody who comes to you with the sort of experience that you had working for Ridges, South Pacific, etc.? Does that become a difficult decision? Or do you say, well, no, this person's been loyal to us? Sorry, I shouldn't have.
No, but honestly, it varies very much by role, right? But let's talk about general manager, because this is the easier one, but I can talk about some of the corporate roles. Some skills, some talent succession is very much dominated from internal. I try and keep the general manager population about 85% internal, okay? But overall, if I look at the overall AMEA number, it's about 55% internal versus external. And then if you look at some of the corporate roles that sit in the center, either brand roles or the distribution roles or digital roles or the IT roles or the design and engineering roles and all these different roles, they often they're far more indexed externally, because they're specialist skills that we do not succession plan well. But some of the frontline service leadership skills we can succession plan really well. Now, I'm also a really big believer, like Karen Shepherd, who runs our business in Australia and Japan, who's the CEO here. Didn't come from operations, she came from brands and had never worked in operations before. So I like swapping people around to give them more experience and putting them in, throwing them in the deep end and see how well they go. But it's right, you need to put the right framework around them and the right support. It's not about making people feel, it's about setting people up for success. General managers we have lately, we've got so many programs in place now to really make sure that we can succession plan very much from internal, and the reason for that is that's the only way we can keep our brand integrity alive, because otherwise, every time we're hiring one GM from one of our friendly competitors, suddenly the hotel took a whole different service level experience, and that's not what we're about, and that's not what we promised our customers. But at the same time, like I said, I was a GM at 26 or 27, something like that. And then suddenly, over the last couple of years, I measured this a few years ago, and you're all millenniums and young people in here. So it took 17 years to become a general manager. Now, there's not many people in this room that are going to hang around for 17 years to become a general manager. So we're really changing the programs to accelerate people through. And we've got the brands. You've got brands now like Holiday Inn Express where you can, our aim is to make sure that people are running, the team, some of our great talent are running these hotels at a very, very young age. And then you can progress up because the industry is changing rapidly. Now, the luxury brands where there's lots of food and beverage and lots of variables are a lot harder.
You were talking to me before about how you've got a program where you
Accelerated GM program.
Sort of select themselves to either be Holiday Express or whatever it might be.
Yeah, we have a program where we graduates from here, and we try and push people through in 2 years to get to a Holiday Inn Express General Manager program. And it's been really, I think, we only started about 18 months ago. We've got about six people through so far, so it's great. And good diversity and lots of local talent, and it's very important for us that we have, Indian talent to run our Indian hotels and Indonesian talent to run our Indonesian hotels. So we've really thought about each layer where we needed the people and where every GM I have is mapped to what he's doing or she's doing today, where he or she will be in 2 years, what type of role, what kind of brand, and who the successor will be.
In a couple of minutes, I'm going to throw the floor open for questions. If you'd raise your hand, and then somebody will bring a microphone to you. So another question from me, or from that have already been from totally unscripted. Food and beverage v. rooms division in different parts of the world, the importance of it. Yes, we'd all agree it's important, but as a revenue generator, obviously in some countries it's much bigger than possibly Australia.
So we obviously the brands that generate the biggest F&B is Intercontinental and Crowne Plaza, which makes sense. But
can I interrupt? Is that through the size of their operations and conventions, banquets, that sort of thing?
40% of the revenue, about 35 to 40% of the revenue in my part of the world comes through food and beverage, of which it's a 50-50 split between banqueting and meetings and banqueting in restaurants and bars. Now, China is the same as myself. The rest of the world, it's like 15%. It's low. Because don't forget, we also run 3 different models. We run a franchise model, a managed model, and an owned model. So the franchise model, we don't really measure the F&B because it's all about the room side of the business. But half the Intercontinental is the largest global luxury brand with about 180 hotels, and half of them in AMEA. So we've got a big Intercontinental portfolio, and we have about 25, 30 under construction.
So even where F&B is a low producer of income, how important is it to the overall bottom line, the revenue of the hotel?
Again, by brand. So if you go, Holiday Inn, it's really about breakfast. I hate to tell you that. It's about bacon and eggs in the morning and congee or whatever we want to. It's really about the breakfast. Crowne Plaza and then you go Intercontinental, it is really essential to the whole experience. And if you then think about a resort business, which we've got a big resort business, there's nothing worse than not having great F&B if you're stuck on an island in the middle of the French Polynesia or Maldives or somewhere. So in the luxury end, it is really, really important, and Crowne Plaza is important, and then it kind of goes down the scale. And like Holiday Inn Express is really, we don't do an F&B offer except for breakfast. We actually encourage our guests to go eat elsewhere.
It's interesting you talk about breakfast, because I think it'd probably be in your time at SBC where breakfast, all you did was just shovel a little bit of money over from rooms to cover the cost. It wasn't actually in itself a revenue raiser. Was that still in your time? No, it wasn't.
No, I was kidding. I know.
But that's
yeah, absolutely. But no, it's essential part of the customer journey and the offer we make.
What's IHG's view on signature chefs in their main restaurants, particularly in?
Absolutely. We've got a culinary panel. Ross Lusset is on our panel here. So we have chefs from around the world on our panel who advise. They design kids' menus and they advise us on stuff. We insource restaurants, outsource restaurants. So we've got Nobu's, we've got all kinds of Michelin-star restaurants spread, especially in the Intercontinental. So when we build an Intercontinental somewhere, we will do a study of what the restaurant, the culinary market is like in the neighborhood. We will look at what the targeted customer is going to be like, and then we will design the F&B experience accordingly. And if it's better for us to not do it ourselves, fine. Because at the end, it all needs to link up on the journey. And in some cases, if it just absolutely makes no sense to have more than one restaurant in that, because there's 6 down the road, it's okay too. I mean, so you really tailor-make it at that high end. Every hotel gets, and our Kimpton brand, which is our lifestyle brand, which is not in Australia yet. It is all about the F&B. In that brand, the people that run the restaurant, and they don't talk about F&B, they talk about restaurants and bars. The people that run the restaurants and bars don't report to the general manager. They're equal.
Time to go back.
Yeah. Val too.
Yes. Question from the floor, somebody. Thank you very much. If you could just, it's one of our lecturers. Thank you, Ms. Pressbury.
Oh, it's an easy question.
Hello.
Hello.
In the last few months, I've had the pleasure, I suppose, of looking for hotels myself as a customer, and therefore looking at the reviews of hotels. And the thing I see that's quite common to the 4- and 5-star properties at least is that reviews are saying, this is a great property, but it's getting tired. The maintenance needs attention. The housekeeping's not so great. Yep. And I was interested in your comments when you said you were asset light, which means that you then have to convince others to upgrade your properties. Yep. And I would imagine that's quite a challenge, and I just wanted to know how you met that challenge.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look, it is a challenge and it's not a challenge. Because it's linked to income, right? So if the hotel is doing good income, the owner will invest in the property. But it adds a skill set that we had to actually train into our general managers, is to how to have that conversation with the owner about the long-term strategy for that asset, how he wanted to what the return he wanted from that asset, and how that then worked in with the investment that had to be made in that asset. And if you think back a couple of years ago, our general managers would never have had those conversations with owners, but we've spent a lot of time training that as part of the general manager development program now, because that's an important conversation. And yes, it is challenging, but not always, because investing in those assets is to the long-term benefit and sustainability of that piece of real estate. But because our industry is cyclical, so it is making sure you have these conversations at the right time and well in advance. And what often happens in our industry is that and it definitely doesn't happen in IHG, right? But often what happens is that, you start talking to an owner a year out saying, look, I need you to spend $50 million on your hotel, instead of talking to him 3 years out and saying, look, we're going to put a 5-year asset plan together, so how are we going to keep this hotel at a certain level? So that's the skill that's the sort of muscle we're trying to develop in our general managers. And last 2 years, we've spent a lot of time training them on having these conversations, and also actually training them on the financials, on how the asset life cycle and how you calculate all that.
On the floor. Student.
Is that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Young man, Locke, one of your employees.
This better be nice, right?
Right. Mr. Smith, programs, and we have about 70 million members. Now, how does IHG make sure that all of the members are engaged and we constantly make that program better? Because a lot of our competitors have loyalty programs as well. So
Yep.
why would someone choose the IHG loyalty program rather than a Hilton or a SPG?
Yep. SPG is not going to be around much longer, but no, just kidding. Yeah, no. As you know, you've worked in the Intercontinental, so you know a bit about this. But the thing is, we do constant research. I mean, the great thing about this digital area is you can get feedback on a constant basis. You can actually measure exactly how your program is working and if it's hitting the spot and if it's doing what the customer wants it to do. So you're constantly introducing new levels, you're tailor making it all the time to make sure you keep the customer engaged and make him come back to your hotel. Because the thing that really, and why we're so strong about loyalty is loyal customers stay more, eat more in your hotel, and actually pay more. And so this is an absolute critical thing, part of our business.
Thank you. At the back of the room.
Hello, my name is Rohit. I have one question: that what kind of opportunities do you think for students like us, like fresh graduates or having like few years of experience in the industry, would have working in the hotels in the remote part of the world? I mean, working
remote.
Oh, remote part?
Yeah, maybe like in Australia, some apart from CBDs, big areas, or maybe in remote areas of the world. Like what kind of opportunities we have if we work in those countries or environments?
Yeah, so we were talking about this today, is to try and make sure that I can see if I can unlock more places in the international side of the business for you to come and do either your work experience time or your release time. But you know, as you would know, a lot of countries have got pretty strict rules around this. But because we often are pretty large in some of these countries, we get allocations. But we are governed outside of Australia, but so if you talk about places like the Maldives and parts of India or Africa, you are governed by the local laws on employment. All right. Here in Australia, if you're mobile, and I haven't spoken about mobility much, but mobility is important even in a country like Australia. And I remember when I was coming through my career, I've worked in I worked in Adelaide, Brisbane, Cairns, Sydney, Melbourne. I worked in every city here except for Canberra and Darwin, I think.
We all work for Canberra.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I didn't work in Perth, Darwin, and Canberra. There are only three I didn't work in, I think. And I worked in Rock, so I get a special stamp for that one. But yeah, so mobility is important, and it's not always easy because you've got family and kids and things. But it is an important part of this industry, and it's an important part, especially in your early years when you're trying to develop and you're trying to put a career together for yourself. Having that sort of exposure to different environments and different cultures and all that will really help you in the long term.
Somebody a little bit closer to the front. Question. Thank you very much. Mr. Whitney, to the fore. Another IHG employee, thank you.
Me? No, I'm not IHG.
No, not you,
Oh,
Mr. Whitney.
Jake. We spoke a bit about engagement before. How do you stay engaged yourself, and what do you think is the best way to have like a healthy work-life balance, being in such a high job and with a lot of pressure and expectations?
Okay. Look, engagement, how do I stay engaged myself? Look, I just love what I do. I don't think I can't recall a day in the last 15 years where I struggled to get out of bed in the morning because I really didn't want to go to work. But the thing is, for me, is, I mean, if people and I'm not saying that because I'm talking to a whole bunch of you, but honestly, talking to owners and meeting all these different cultures and all these different experiences and being able to put a strategy together and then seeing it come to life is very exciting. And, you know, and spending some time thinking about an accelerated program and then seeing 6 people that have been given the opportunity to run a Holiday Express because we took some time to really think about it. So that motivates me. From a work-life balance point of view, you need to nowadays be absolutely disciplined about your health and your fitness and what you eat and what you don't eat. The days of staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, drinking beers and all that is pretty tough nowadays, because it's a bit like some of how sport has changed. So I love my Formula One, right? And I remember in the 70s, the drivers used to hop out of the car and light a cigarette. And nowadays, they train for 15 hours a day to drive the same car. So the thing is, I'm not saying that I'm that disciplined, as you can see. But I tend to exercise a lot. I run and I go to the gym and I watch what I eat. And I try and have a routine, build habit. Because the hardest thing is when I travel, because I spend about half my life out of Singapore, is to keep that discipline. But you also have to have fun.
On that, you say
the fun bit or the
well,
exercise
no,
bit?
sort of. I won't go too close. You say you're disciplined about what you eat. What is your favourite food? Which country, which place do you go to, and you say, well, that's what I'm going to have when I get there. That's what I really want to eat, even if it's not in the regime of staying fit.
Oh, oh, look, I love going to Japan because it's just the freshness of the food and just the flavors is just fantastic. So I always really look there. I love going to Thailand and my pad thais and all my Thai food, which is not very good with all the coconut and stuff. India, I mean, if you want to eat vegetarian food in India, it's just fantastic. When I go to the UK, I'm in the UK about 6-7 times a year. You know, good pork sausage in the morning, nothing like it. They use different sorts of sausages in the UK. So look, you know,
Don't use meat. That's the trick.
but they taste good. Yeah, and then so I like my Asian food. I mean, I don't forget I grew up in that part of the world since I was 7-8 years old, so it's part of my diet. And then you come back to Sydney, and you know, just the seafood here is just fantastic. Good piece of fish. So I like my variety. Yeah.
Well, you have an opportunity to have a good variety.
Lucky, very fortunate.
Questions from the floor. We'll go with this young man first, and then it's okay. You're next, sir.
Good evening. My name is Dinesh Chaudhary, and I'm also an Intercon employee at the circular team. The question which I would request you to enlighten my peer group here would be in terms of the Future Leader program. How our Future Leader program is different and beneficial for future managers in this room as compared to our competitors.
Oof. Ad break. Thank you. I mean, but look, I spoke about the accelerated piece, but we have very much layered it at different layers. You got the IHG Academy, which is in 140 hotels around the world, which is right at the entry level into a hotel, where we work with providers, learning providers in those markets, and at grassroots level to help people. We teach them English and help people to get into the hotels, which is part of our responsible business platform. To the accelerated program I spoke about, to where we now have dedicated development for just Intercontinental luxury end of our business. So we have different layers. So depending on where you want to work in the business, if you want to go into the hotels or you want to be in corporate, there's a program to make sure that at every different level we have something that will absolutely get you ready to be successful. And it's absolutely, and I mean, honestly, this is not just lip service. And I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't believe it, but to get the right talent and then make sure that people are developed and have really clear development plans and support to be successful is absolutely essential for us to be able to do anything else we want to do in this business, either look after the owners or look after your guests or bring these brands to life. If you do not have the right people that are trained and engaged, it's just not going to happen.
First, yeah, the words you use, you've got to be passionate and want to do it. It doesn't matter what program is in place, if you're not going to be passionate about it and want to do it, it's not going to work.
The last message I do want to leave with you is, it doesn't matter how great these IHG programs or my friendly competitor programs are, you're in charge of your own career and you're in charge of your own destiny, and you need to grab it by the horns and take it, because no one else is going to do it for you, and you can't sit back one day and go, how come I missed the boat and the person sitting next to you is suddenly off and running. It's your career, and you need to own it, and you need to manage it and own it.
Okay. Thank you. We had a question over there. Thank you.
Thank you. I come from one of the competitor hotels. I've been
Oh, no. How did he get in the room?
One of the questions that I had is, I've worked with another hotel, as I mentioned, that uses accelerated programs, and we've had our general managers come in on 6-month stints before shuffling off. How do you deal with the impact that these accelerated programs have on each hotel when the managers or general managers are changing out?
We don't do it that way. No, we're serious, we don't, because you can't destabilize the hotel. So when I talk about accelerated for the Holiday Inn Express, this person will shadow the general manager for a while and then get their own hotel. But it's not sitting in a chair and then 6 months later you're gone. That doesn't work. You need the stability and the leadership on a permanent basis. So I know what you're talking about, but we don't believe in that. It needs to be an auxiliary role to the general manager to get it through. So you should come for us, work for us, yeah.
Just while some of you think about another question, you may not be able to share with us, but out of all your brands, which is the most profitable, not in sheer amount, but say percentage-wise or in sheer amount, if you can share?
Wow. Well, it varies a lot.
Well, if you just want to put it to 5 to 3 stars.
Okay, so and as you know, we don't bank percentage, right? So remember, we bank dollars. But the thing is, from a sheer percentage profitability, Holiday Inn Express is the most profitable brand. But I can tell you, there's a couple of Intercontinentals that will have the same percentage. We've got an Intercontinental Mecca in Saudi Arabia, which is very, very profitable. It's about the same level, top 50, above 50% profitability for a luxury hotel. So it varies dramatically. But if you really look at it, the select service, which is at the Express, where you don't have F&B, it's just a pure rooms product, it is high. So, for instance, the Holiday Inn Express in Singapore, which is it's a big one, it's a 420-room hotel, has 32 employees. So you get the drift. It's highly profitable. everything's outsourced. But you've got Intercontinentals where people like, in French Polynesia where people are paying $1,500 a night, and you get you'll get the margin in a different way. Yeah, and so it is very much location, brand driven more than just platform. But Express is profitable. That's why Holiday Inn Express was only launched first in '92 in the US, and now we have 2,800 of them. So it must have appealed. It appealed both to the guests really well because it was very tailored, and the owners love them. But they're for specific location, specific purpose.
Question this is really from me, is that owners must come to you and say, we want to build a hotel X. How do you tell them that maybe a Holiday Inn Express might be better than the Intercontinental that they think they want to have? How do you handle that? Or how do you actually even reject an owner when you think, well, we just don't want this fella as an owner or a lady?
A couple of things we do. I can tell you from this Holiday Inn Express I spoke about in Singapore, I was personally involved in because the owner is a very high net worth individual, and I knew him really well, and it was the first time he was going back into the industry. So, and honestly, every brand was giving him advice on what it should be, and I said, no, you should go. Although he paid a lot of money for the land, as in Singapore, the land is really, really expensive. I said, no, you go really build a big select service hotel and you'll make more money than if you put an Intercontinental or a Hilton or whatever else you want to put on it, or 2 hotels. And it took me about 3-4 months to convince him, and eventually I did. And he's made more money now. The hotel, it cost him 200 million, is valued at about 600 million now, so he's a happy man. And it was the best thing, but it takes a while and took trust. I had to build a relationship, and I had to ask him to, and I showed him the demographics, and I showed him why I believed this. And sure, all the strategy people were doing all the work in the background for me. I was just trying to make sure that, and we won the contract, and we did the hotel, and off we went. And it made an enormous amount of money. How do we reject owners? How do we reject owners? We don't actually reject owners, but we do because.
Well, how does it ever occur?
We're a FTSE 100 company, right? We're listed in the UK. We're a public company, so we have to make sure that when owners build hotels, that where the money comes from, and so we do probity check on our owners to make sure that the funds are legitimate and things like that. We have to do that to make sure that everything is right. So we don't get involved in things that we shouldn't be involved in.
All right, I think this has in part been answered, but it probably bears some repetition. This is from somebody in Facebook. What do you look for in inexperienced employees? So obviously people in this room are coming with some experience. What do you look for somebody who's not experienced? I presume in hospitality they're talking about.
I hope so. Honestly, it's the passion and the energy and just that sheer drive of really wanting to do it and wanting to get ahead is what I look for. And often like I said, I'll take people from brands and stick them like Karen. And it was just her great skills with people and her real ambition and drive and her willingness to really, you need to take a risk and you need to be prepared to make a mistake. And because people that always play safe, it's not always works that way. And you need to be able to, make them calculated. My chairman always tells me that the risks I take and the mistakes I can make are only a small number compared to, he used to be the CEO of Unilever, and every time he made a mistake, it was going to cost $50 million. So he goes, make a few mistakes.
Question from the floor. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, we'll be with you in 1 second. Yeah, we're going with you first. Thank you.
To ask about your view and your reaction on Airbnb, yeah, on the global scale.
Yeah. Look, I think what Airbnb has done is amazing, right? But really, what it is, it's a lot of it existed in the past, but it was fragmented. But Airbnb managed to roll it into a one-stop shop and put it on a platform, which is absolutely fantastic. So I get back to people use hotels or Airbnb or the different models of that for the occasion they want to use it for. And so it is very important that it is a coexisting thing. I mean, if you want to go and stay in an apartment in the middle of Paris, that's what you want to do. If you want to stay in a hotel, you'd stay in a hotel. If you want to stay in an apartment, you'd stay in an apartment. And look, the challenge thing for Airbnb is that the more and more countries are now trying to restrict the spread of it, because it's kind of, if you think about the original founder, what they wanted to do was create unique experiences and enable people to experience unique experiences in certain parts of the city by being right in the heart of the city in an apartment. What has ended up is that whole apartment blocks are now Airbnb, and body corporates and all that are starting to get. So it will take a little bit more time for it to find its original purpose. And I can tell you, it is just a totally different experience and different occasion.
Since it's become organised, is there any...
Mountains, you used to have a whole bunch of real estate agents running around selling apartments. Now you used to do Airbnb.
Several of our staff have gone into it. Since it's become organised, has there been any noticeable change? Has it affected any of your businesses at all?
No, really not. Okay. But look, the amount of travel, the rate travels is increasing, and the aging population, and people have more time and they want to travel, and travel is not... When the 2008 downturn came, the really interesting thing was, what I thought was that leisure, so not corporate, not the business travel, but leisure travel actually increased, which I thought was fascinating, right? Because the whole world is collapsing, banks are imploding on themselves. But people are still traveling. The corporate travel just kind of disappeared overnight, a lot of it. But leisure actually increased, and it has never decreased again. And so, through cheap airfares and all that, you can go anywhere. I mean, living in Singapore, I can get on a plane any minute and go to some of the best resorts or wherever I want to go. So there's going to be more demand. So there's going to be room for everyone, I think.
Do you ever stay outside the IHG family? No, well, it's just your last comment, mate.
Very seldomly. Very seldomly. But I've had an Airbnb experience for the first time, right? So I took the family to Amsterdam a couple of weeks in June. And I don't get me wrong, I don't spend much time in Holland, right? I don't see myself as Dutch, but I wanted to take the kids, and I wanted them to stay on one of those canal boats, those houseboats, and I knew exactly where I wanted to be. So it was perfect. I went on Airbnb, and I wanted to try it. That was my first time, and I booked it, and it was exactly where I wanted to be. It was a great experience. But there was an occasion where I wanted to stay on a houseboat, and that was the experience I wanted. And I chose to provide it that I thought would give me that experience. And it was great. So I'm not going to plug Airbnb, though.
No. Okay.
But it was a good experience. My kids had a good time.
The children demanded it. Now, there was a question at the back of the room there. Thank you.
My name's Hian. I'm working for IHG as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well done.
It's a fantastic working place. So I just want to ask for your advice. Like, so you say that you were the general manager when you were 27, very young. So what is your advice? Like, we should go to a bigger corporation with a hierarchy structure to start with our career, or should we go to the smaller hotels to afford a better promotion opportunities?
Oh, wow.
What's your advice? Thank you.
It's a tough one. So you're saying we're hierarchical? No, no. But honestly, I don't know if there's a. I don't know how to answer this. I honestly think you need to. I think you need to go work for whatever, if it's a big or a small organization, but you need to go work for an organization that shares your values. And someone that actually wants to help you get ahead and cares for you, and make sure that you need to let them know where you want to go. Does that help? But honestly, I don't know. I don't think a big or small makes people work for people. So you need to go and work. You need to find somewhere where they share your values, and whoever your leader is, you need to make sure that they're very clear on what your aspirations are. So
thank you.
My advice to you.
Does that answer your question? Good.
I can talk later a bit more if you want.
Hello,
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Constance. Apart from you mentioned before, as leaders, we need to have cultural awareness and then to consider about the diversity. But apart from this, because nowadays, I think security and safety is also challenging for hotels. I would like to ask, how can IHG to facing this challenge? And I would like to ask about, is that bring any impact on the hotel operation? Is there any change or any plan, any change on the training? And then as leaders, do we need to consider more about on this area? Thank you.
Yeah, security, security of our guests and our employees is absolutely critical. And I have a lot of hotels in some of the more interesting hotspots of the world at the moment. But yeah, we spend a lot of time on training. We spend a lot of time on awareness, training, prevention. In some countries, we employ people that keep a very close eye on what's happening in the market, so that we get early warnings sometimes. Yes, so things have changed, unfortunately. And as you check into hotels in some countries, you have to go through an enormous amount of security and safety and things like that. So the world is very, very different. So it's about awareness. To stop it is very, very difficult, all right? But it's about awareness of training your leaders and your employees. It's about having, making sure that you have insight into what's happening in those markets. So we do a lot, but we try and do a lot without it too much impacting the customer. The other thing that we spend a lot of time on is operating responsibly, which is the second part of the thing that's changed over the last couple of years, especially in countries where there's lack of water, waste, prostitution, all these sort of things. We try and make sure that we operate in a responsible way to make sure that we look after the environment, our people, etc., etc.
Does that answer your question? Okay. I've got a question here. I'll get it down. You operate, particularly here in Sydney, several properties with brands that are fairly close to one another. I know there's probably contractual distances and all that sort of thing, but how do you manage your owners? Let's take the two Intercontinentals. I mean, they're not far apart.
Yeah, but they're very, very different customers.
But it has to be a distinct difference in
yeah, absolutely. And like before I signed the second Intercontinental, I did go and talk to the owner of the first Intercontinental, and I took him through why this was not going to be bad for his hotel. And this is part of the relationship. And I actually did this particular one myself. And but honestly, you can especially a Holiday Inn Express. In Bangkok, for instance, some of these bigger cities. I mean, Bangkok could. I mean, Sydney. You could have 20 Holiday Inn Expresses, and they would not even impact each other. And some of the more challenged cities with infrastructure like Jakarta or Delhi or Mumbai, I mean, people go and stay in a specific location because if you have to go from here to here, it could take you an hour and a half. So you could have a Holiday Inn and a Holiday Inn here, and they're a totally different market.
You said that staff are very important, if not the most important element of your hotels. How important is Wi-Fi, IT, in the scale of things?
Yep.
For the guest, obviously.
Well, Wi-Fi is the #1 dissatisfier. So if it's not fast enough, not quick enough, or you can't, blah 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 blah. It is. I mean, it's #1. I mean, dissatisfier when it doesn't work. When it works, no one cares. So it's just one of these things, right? Well, from a people point of view, if you get bad service or good service, people do care because it's such a relationship. But yeah, Wi-Fi, if it doesn't work, you get really told it doesn't work. If it works, no one is going to come and say, I'm going to stay in this hotel because it's the best Wi-Fi in the world. But they say, I'm not going to stay in this hotel because it's the worst Wi-Fi in the world. And
okay, thank you. I'm disowning this question, but I will ask it. It's from Edmund Go. Are male employees more likely to be in higher management positions, as most high-powered positions seem to be held by males?
He answers his own question. Yeah, unfortunately, depends where. How do I answer this? In the corporate environment, in the offices in the center, it's a pretty well. It's a pretty close to a 50-50 mix.
Can you just go back to accelerated
So
program?
my executive team, when I took over, there was how do I don't get myself in trouble here, but no, never mind. There was about 12 people. When I took over, 7 were Australian. There was one female, and the rest were all male. And now we have 8 nationalities and half a female, and it gives you far better mix to make decisions, to have debate, and it's also the age group varies in my executive team from 35 to I must be the oldest one, so somewhere above 50 and 55, so 35 to 55, and you've got a whole variety of age in there. And I think there's only 2 of us over 50, and the rest are all in the early 40s and late 30s. So it's a real nice diversity you need nowadays to make the right decisions, I think. The world's fast, changing fast, and your demographic, the people that are actually using your hotels are in that age bracket. And the other question was, so at the general manager level, we struggle. And there's a whole, me and the head of HR, Deborah Woolard, we spent a lot of time trying to understand how we can get a more gender diversity into our general manager population. And the really great thing of what I shared with you before, the accelerated program is actually 80% of female that came through that. And by no engineering, it's just, that's. Look, yeah, the general manager population is tough.
Question on...
But not impossible, so don't give up, please.
Question on, as China, as customers peaked, or can we expect it to continue to grow?
Oh, it will move. So when the bombs went off in Paris, the Chinese travel patterns changed, and they all moved. A lot of them moved to Japan, but Japan is running at 95%. Japan is absolutely full at the moment. If you want to try and get a room in Japan, forget it. It's just everyone's going to Japan at the moment. So it will move, and markets will change, and as travelers get more sophisticated, it will go further. So we're now starting to see Chinese tourists in French Polynesia. Now you go 3 years ago, there wouldn't have been one Chinese person going to French Polynesia, and we've got more and more Chinese visitors into Dubai. So it will move, but it's a huge population hungry to travel and experience the world, which is fantastic.
We'll take another question from the floor. Oh, okay, it always happens right at the end. We start to get them. All right, this young man here. Sorry, we'll bring the microphone. Thank you. We're going to wrap it up in about 5 minutes. Okay.
Hello, good evening. My question is, how do you deal with customer or guest experience? Are the strategies keep on changing, or you hold your culture together, or give your hotel experience?
So how do we deliver guests? Because I answered in the beginning, it was like you have to have a very clear, you need to really understand what your brand's about. So for a brand, like any brand, Crowne Plaza, we will map the 6 or 7 touch points that through research the customer wants that you absolutely have to nail. Right, so you do the research, and they'll tell you, this is important to me, this is important to me, this is important to me, this is important to me. And you just have to, and then we train our employees to make sure that we hit those points exactly how it was intended to, and how the expectation of the customer is. So, and a brand is a living, evolving thing. You need to nurture it, you need to keep it alive, you need to, it evolves, it grows, and it matures, and so these things will change, but not dramatically. And what the really interesting thing is the deviation by market of some of these brands is not as big as we think. It's sometimes only about 30%. And 70% is consistent across different nationalities. Guests expect the same thing. So we do localize where we need to customize to the customer. Do our strategies change? At my level, I constantly have to look at my strategy, right? Because, you know, at the moment you've got wars all over the Middle East, the oil price goes down. So I can't just be doing the same thing. I need to work out. And then suddenly India, you know, has been down, and now it's growing at 8%. So I need to, you know, think how I'm going to grow quicker in that market. So yeah, you do trim your sales, so to speak. But I'd say that 70 or 80% of the strategy, the high level strategy will stay the same. And now you've got markets like Iran opening up. So I have to go and see, is there an opportunity in Iran? Do I want to go and build a business there? Can I build a business there? So you do all that work, and then you have to decide, because you've got a limited amount of resources, you've got 40 countries, you've got opportunities everywhere, and you just need to make sure you make the right bets.
All right. Okay, that gentleman there. I think, unfortunately, I have to be the last one, but we might be able to ask yours afterwards.
My question is on the, I'm curious about your view on the online travel agents, because I know that for a fact that your competitors is going back to direct booking. So what is the stand of IHG on this?
Thank you.
Okay, that had to be the last question, huh? Look, again, a bit like the Airbnb, and I'm not trying to give you a political answer here, right? So don't get me wrong. We do need to coexist, right? And travel agents and intermediaries have always been there, okay? And there's certain, it's a very important part of our channel, because we look at the different channels, how the customers come into a hotel. And it's an important channel, but we manage it to where we need it and where we don't need it. Obviously, we do push our own channels first, because that's through our loyalty program and through different things. We have close user groups in some cases where, you know, we go direct to customers. So there's so many different channels that come into a hotel, and the revenue managers have to pull the levers as is needed. And that's how it works. And OTAs are there, and we're there, and we're all happily coexisting, so to speak. And look, but there's next generations. You know, Google is now trying to eat the OTAs, so I mean, digital is going to change the world, and the hotels you guys are going to run are very different than the hotels that I ran. I can tell you that now.
I know a couple of you may have another question, but Mr. Smits has kindly agreed to stay behind for a few minutes afterwards, so you may have an opportunity to ask your question directly. My final, you've given a lot of advice. You've given us a lot of valuable information. Could you give some advice to these young people who are about to head off on their careers into the hospitality industry, a nice punchy piece
finish.
of advice?
Look, I remember when I decided to go into hotels and the hospitality industry. My father was an engineer, my grandfather was an engineer, and he said, "Can't you get a real job, all right? And this is not a career, this is not an industry." And so I challenged him, and I'm a pretty stubborn sort of person, and so I went and did what I wanted to do. And it's been the best thing I've ever done in my life. It is a career, it is an industry. If you put your mind to it and you really embrace it, it can take you on an incredible journey. I can tell you, when I started in Brisbane, I didn't think I'd be living in Singapore. So it's been a great journey, and it is a real business. So the opportunity is there. The industry is changing a lot quickly. The digital side will change it forever. But it's a growth industry, and it's going to keep growing, and people want to experience. They want to keep experiencing different things. They want to the amount of people that travel nowadays, it's enormous. So and it can take you wherever. It can take you from. I've got general managers. All they want to do is run a hotel, or it can take you to my role. And the opportunity is yours, and it's just up to you. You just have to manage your career. But show the passion. Don't lose the passion. And if someone says no, try to find a yes, all right? Don't take no for an answer ever.
Certainly Mr. Smits has tried to answer all your questions. We've done our very best, so thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.